My name is Ouissal. I'm the CEO and founder of ZEDEDA. Really excited to be here today. Excited to introduce you guys to ZEDEDA, talk a little bit about Edge, what we do at the Edge. First, a couple of words around ZEDEDA. So, when we started ZEDEDA, we saw basically two trends that were coming together. On one end, IoT. Anything that can get connected will get connected. More and more enterprises, more and more companies are, applying sensors, cameras, everything else to, to their business. And all of those devices are generating tremendous amounts of data. And that's what these devices are being put in place for, is to get data out of physical environments. Obviously, the other big trend that was already ongoing was cloud computing. Any app that can run in the cloud will run in the cloud. We're very convinced of that. Cloud brings a lot of benefits around software development, agility, and everything else. But what we saw was a disconnect where people were saying, well, we're just going to connect all these devices to the network and upload all that data to the cloud in its entirety. And a lot of us are networking folks. We work for companies like Juniper, Ericsson, Cisco, Arista. So we kind of understand how networks are built, how the internet is built, how access technologies are being applied. And it was very clear for us that this was going to be very difficult to upload all that raw data straight to the cloud. It's a lot of data. Our networks are not built for uploading data. Your typical LTE connection or 5G connection downloads very fast, uploads very slow. So it was very clear for us, if we can't get the data to the cloud to analyze it, process it, apply AI and everything else, then probably the cloud will have to be pushed to the edge of the network. And in particular, the applications and everything else that comes with cloud computing will have to be pushed all the way there. And that's really how we define edge computing. It's taking all the goodness that we're used to in the cloud and applying today in the cloud and making it possible in environments where today that is not possible yet. Now, edge is, since we started, became a big word. I think nowadays, if you're not a cloud company, you're sort of automatically an edge company. It encompasses a lot. I think the good news is I think there's more and more clarity out there nowadays. What are the different layers in the edge? And this is from an analyst, which kind of talks about, as if you look at cloud as the pinnacle and the top of everything, the different layers of edge computing. And I think what we saw and kind of identified early on is, you talk about your typical data center that is becoming cloud native and you're applying cloud technologies, connecting it to the cloud and everything else. You're talking about environments that we're talking about racked compute. We're talking about, environmental controls, UPS, physically secure environments, all the good stuff that we've put in place over the years as we built data centers. But what we also saw was there's a few more layers in this edge stack that are not addressed. And we call this the distributed edge. And basically, as soon as you start putting tiny compute outside of a data center, it doesn't necessarily look like a server. And we actually brought a couple of systems here today. But this is an example of an edge compute node. Probably over there in the device edge, gateway edge, that you would want to run a server application, process data from a camera or sensor or anything else. We got a few more here. When you start going to those type of environments, you are not necessarily anymore in the domain that we've built our original cloud capabilities in. How do you run Kubernetes on a device like this? How do you secure a device like this? How do you manage and deploy a lot of these out there? So this is really what we identified as the distributed edge. And we as a company said, well, we think we can actually help customers with this layer of the edge computing out there. So that's us. We basically have built a solution to orchestrate and manage edge compute, like you see here. And really aiming to take that experience from the cloud as much as possible, within the constraints that we're dealing with, and pushing it out all in these highly distributed environments out there. Our North Star is the cloud. So if we'll talk about the cloud guys and you log in on a console or dashboard, or you use the APIs through management and everything else, you can spin up services, you can create VMs, you can deploy Kubernetes, you can do agile development and push out updates every few days or every week or every other week. Taking that, but now being able to do that in environments like this is really our goal. So we are very much, partnering with the cloud folks. We very much see it as a partnership between cloud and edge, and trying to help customers basically to capitalize on investments they made in the cloud. By the nature of the markets we address, we initially, from the early days, focus on industrial, energy, automotive, retail, not your typical, standard IT environments. Some folks call it OT, operational technology. So we are sitting often very close in the field, close to hard hats, very close to machines, very close in these highly distributed environments. As a company, started and we built our product and released it a few years ago, we actually are in large-scale deployments. We have several Fortune 500, Global 500 customers deploying us. We'll talk a bit more about some of the examples out there. And we're really seeing that the edge computing market is mainstreaming as customers are trying to adopt data-driven decisions, AI, digital transformation in their business. The team that came together from ZEDEDA came with a very diverse background. Obviously, this is a new market, so we have folks that come from the cloud world, folks that come from the networking world, security, virtualization, and as well as open source. So a really diverse group from a lot of the companies here in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and Seattle that many of you are familiar with. And I think the other thing that we really, brought with the team is actually a lot of experience. A lot of our folks have written patents in the past around like network virtualization or other things, IETF, RFCs, IPv6, and other routing standards and everything else. So I think really an experience about how do you build this at scale and how do you make this possible for an enterprise, a Global 500 to successfully deploy. We've got a lot of investors in the company. So the company, I think what was very unique about us and interesting is a lot of our customers invested in us because of the strategic importance that they often see that Edge brings to it. So you see a few logos here, companies like Emerson, Chevron, Rockwell, Juniper, Porsche Venture. So it gives you a little bit of a sense of the type of companies we work with, as well as the companies that have edge computing very high in their strategic roadmap. So a few words around where we typically get deployed. A couple of examples. Oil and gas has been actually a market we addressed really early on. It's a very data-driven market. It's actually a market that adopted cloud computing already in the early days. So we're working with like top oil and gas services companies that are using us to do things like drilling or characterize reservoirs after they do drilling. There are also a lot of them moving into renewable energy. So we're seeing a lot of action there as well in terms of solar farms. We actually have customers that use us to manage solar energy farms, remote around the world. We are also doing a lot of work in building automation. And then on the automotive side, we have a customer that's actually using us to deploy compute to their dealers that is used to update the firmware in vehicles when they dropped off for software updates, as well as read out all the logs and data from the car, analyze it, and send it back to the cloud. A very good, I think, edge use case if you kind of think about the challenges as people go to EVs and software-defined vehicles. And we even have customers that deploy us inside machines. Bob's is a customer out of Switzerland. They build very large packaging machines. They're market leader. And basically we are running in these machines. There's thousands of these machines deployed around the world. And they basically are running a cloud-native modern stack in every of these machines. And they even provide software updates that makes these machines do new things. So basically customers can subscribe to new software as a service. But the software is not running in the cloud, but it's actually running in an edge node that's sitting inside these machines. So very exciting environments. And what I really loved about doing with ZEDEDA is all of these are very different verticals, very different problems. We learn a lot about oil and gas. We learn a lot about machine building. We learn a lot about automotive. And it's basically every day is, I think, an opportunity to learn something new about an industry that is maybe not traditionally IT. We also have built a few very strategic customer relationships. We call them OEM relationships. So the way to think about this is in certain markets, we basically have a company like a Rockwell, for instance, that takes a product, packages it with their hardware and software, and then sells it to their customers. So if you're not familiar with Rockwell, they're a leader in industrial automation software. So if you're building a machine, if you're a consumer packaged goods company and you want to build a machine for chips or anything else, you're going to be using Rockwell components as one of the vendors. Conveyor belts, robotic arms, drive motors, all of that great stuff. All of that being connected to edge compute nodes powered by ZEDEDA with Rockwell software and services and hardware around that. We also have a relationship with VMware. We actually announced about 9 months ago. So VMware announced a new product called the Edge Compute Stack, and we're part of the 2.0 product, which is really focusing on the distributed edge as well. So you can get a product with VMware, and we'll talk a bit later about some of the integrations that we've built with VMware that we're really excited about. And then finally, very recently, we actually announced a partnership with Emerson. Emerson is a leader in process automation. So if you think about Rockwell machines and robot arms and process, anything that has to do with pipelines and power, anything that is liquid or fluids, etc. So they're a leader in that. They build things like distributed control systems that manage all the valves and everything else. And also those now are becoming intelligent, the ability to run cloud-native workloads, analyze that data, and improve operations. So again, very excited. So customers either work directly with us or they work with some of these, partners of us, that strategic partners that help these customers in specific areas.
Do you have customers that are working both with the OEM and directly? I mean, so maybe they have some projects managed by one of your partners, but they want to, and are the solutions at that point interoperable. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about architecture. We kind of designed a product for that, that sometimes one group may start working directly with us, another group may incorporate an Emerson technology or Rockwell technology. But how can we still give them that consistent experience, this kind of distributed cloud experience and a single interface, and even see those nodes and apps regardless if they're supplied through the Emerson side or directly through the ZEDEDA side? We actually have built that because we realize that businesses are very diverse. There's very different factors that drive these decisions. But basically, our product and our offering consists of three components. One, we built a cloud-based orchestration service. Think of it like the brain of the edge orchestration engine. It runs in the cloud. We deliver it as software as a service. It has a nice GUI. Most of our customers don't necessarily use the GUI. They use the APIs. So they plug these APIs into Jenkins, or they plug it into other CI/CD loops or in their overall automated infrastructure. And basically, this is where all the nodes call home to. This is where we have the statistics. This is where we maintain the state of the edge, and we know what's going on in the edge. So this is really, call it with the cockpit of your edge deployment. Obviously, software is not running in the cloud. It's running on this type of hardware out there in the field, containers, VMs, network services, etc. They're running on top of an operating system that is part of the Linux Foundation. It's called EVE, EVE. It stands for the Edge Virtualization Engine. That's what we started with 5 years ago, but it's kind of become a lot more since then. But we decided very early on that we wanted to build a standard for edge computing as much as provide a commercial solution. And the analogy I can give is, same way how Android took Linux and adapted it and made it work in mobile phones. We're trying to do the same thing with EVE. Basically, take that, heavily adapted to the edge computing needs, and open source it. And so the license of EVE is in the Linux Foundation. We are obviously a collaborator. We're a large maintainer, but we're not the only one. And we've seen other companies as well come in and participate in the roadmap, in architecture, and the evolution of EVE. We'll go a lot more detail in how EVE is built and why we decided to build EVE in the first place. But it is an absolutely key part of our solution. And then last but not least, obviously all of this is great, but you're deploying applications, you're deploying network services, you're deploying things that analyze data or do intelligent stuff. And so that's where we built an ecosystem. So there's many vendors and partners out there, ISVs, companies that build AI for the edge, companies that build just automation software. So you see a couple of vendors here listed: network services, security. We found everything possible under the sun that has to run or a combination thereof on these edge nodes. And we actually expose these through a marketplace. And the way to think about it is just like in the cloud, when you log in and there's a marketplace, and with a few clicks, you can spin up the services. Same thing on our edge orchestration system. There's a marketplace, and you can spin up these applications. Of course, customers also bring their own apps. Many customers build their own apps, and they can also publish these apps themselves in the marketplace and make them available within their enterprise. So as we go to the next section, I don't know if there's any more questions, but if not, we'll go in and talk a little bit more about the unique challenges of the edge and so how what we learned in the early days here.